As most people know, just a week ago, we had a pretty big victory out of the great state of Texas as John Cornyn, the incumbent, suffered one of the biggest defeats in modern history. Just look at this right here. Ken Paxton beat John Cornyn, not by 1%, not by 5. No, he won by over 27%. Yeah, a 27-point victory in Texas. It was such a big victory. Most polls had it within a couple of points. Yet no one, and I mean not a single person, thought it was be this close. Yet Ken Paxton won by this much anyways. And now we got to talk about the general election because even though Ken Paxton clearly won in a landslide, won by a record margin, yet a bunch of people on the right are still suggesting that not only will Ken Paxton underperform, he's going to actually lose to James Telrico in November. And I should be clear about one thing. I'm not even denying the idea of Ken Paxton underperforming. In fact, I think that's a guarantee. Listen, Ken Paxton, he's great on the issues. Everybody knows that. But yeah, he's not the strongest candidate ever. Yeah, he won by a decent margin in 2022, but so did everybody else. That's not really saying much. But still, I think that this idea that Ken Paxton will not just underperform, which, fine, I agree with that to a certain extent. But some people are going even further and suggesting, no, Ken Paxton will not just underperform. He's actually going to lose, which is just insane. People are making it sound like Ken Paxton has no electoral experience statewide. He's never won anything before. He's such a weak candidate. Is he a weaker candidate than some other people? Yes, that is true. He does have legitimate scandals. And that's why I think Telrico, I don't think he's going to win, but I do think it's going to be closer than you would want it to be in Texas. But even then, Ken Paxton, for those that don't know, has been the Attorney General of Texas for 12 years. It's not like he became a big name 5 minutes ago, came out of nowhere. And even before that, he was in the state Senate. He was in the state House for years. Now, of course, you cannot just say, well, he was the AG for 12 years. That automatically means he's going to win. That's not what I'm saying, because just because it is a statewide race, that doesn't automatically translate. You're talking about a local race versus a federal race. You're talking about different set of circumstances. It is a different midterm. It's a bit more Democrat. So you can't really compare the two, but still, people are just leaving that part out, leaving out important context of Ken Paxton. And if you want to really go further and make a big stink surrounding his scandals, which I'm not even denying that that's the main reason that Paxton is not the strongest candidate electorally, that's a fair point. But guys, most of the scandals surrounding Paxton, it dropped before even 2022. Yes, some of the other details came out in 2023 during his impeachment. We all know about that. He separated from his wife. We all get that. But guys, people knew before even 2022 that Paxton had some serious scandals. That's why he underperformed in 2018. Even in 2022, a bunch of Republicans in Texas wanted him out. That's why they forced him into a runoff. He still won by a big margin, but still, even in 2022, Ken Paxton was facing significant problems because of these scandals. Right at the peak, if not right before the peak of the hysteria. Yet he still won. It's been a couple of years now. We've had, 2 or 3 elections straight where every time they talk about Paxton's scandals, he underperforms, but guess what? He still wins. That's all that matters. He's dealt with these scandals for years now. Yet each and every single time, he pulls it off. He still wins. 2018, close margin. He still won by like 4 points. 22, won by 10. That is very noteworthy because it just shows that, yeah, even with the scandals, it hurts him. It does significantly lower Paxton's ceiling. But even in a more localized race, which theoretically these scandals should have sunk him a bunch of times, guess what? It didn't. In fact, he still won in 22 by just under 10 points. Yes, I know 22 is a right wave, but you get the point that Yeah, Paxton's gonna underperform, but are we gonna really expect this 15-point underperformance like some people are suggesting? I don't think so. If that was the case, where was it back in 22? Where? He still won by a big margin. Again, I know it's a different set of circumstances, but still, if it didn't impact him as much in a AG race, do you think it's going to impact him for the US Senate? To the point of not just underperforming, but losing? I find that hard to believe. And that's the issue here. If this was back in 2022 at the peak of the hysteria, that's a different story. It's been a couple years now. Most people have moved on from the scandals. Most people have moved on, if not in some cases, forgotten about it completely. People don't give a shit about it anymore. So, yes, I think Ken Paxton, he's not going to win by 25 points or whatever, or even by 10, but I do believe he's still going to probably pull it off at the end of the day. Maybe a lot closer than it should be, but guess what? If he wins by 3 points or wins by 7 points, who cares? A win is still a win. But I do think it is be closer. That's the one thing I do agree with most people on. I just don't think Paxton has high enough ceiling to win by 15 points. I just don't think that's the case. And you look at the polling right now, and we know polling in Texas especially can be wacky and it can be pretty bad. In fact, in the Texas primary, the polls dramatically overstated John Cornyn in the runoff. Ken Paxton won by 27. The polls had him up by maybe a point or two. Some had him losing. But whatever. You get the point that Texas polling, it can be wacky, but you do look at them and right now, they do have Rico with a small lead. That's true. Outside of two polls, public policy polling, which is a Democrat eternal, and the University of Texas, they have a D+8. Outside of those two, every other pollster is basically within the margin of error. Like, it's not this D+12 race that some people are saying. At best for Rico, in the polling averages, it's +3. But you may notice a noteworthy trend in the polling. Basically, every single one of these polls has Rico at 45% or lower. Only a couple have him above 45%. Only two have him at 47. Guess what? That's not enough to win. If Rico is consistently at 50%, that's a different story. In that scenario, yeah, that's not good for Ken Paxton. But that's not the case at all. In fact, Rico is struggling to crack 45%. And that's a big deal for two reasons. One, Rico has had 3 months since his primary. 2 months, I should say. It's been 2 months since his primary, which has given him enough time to focus on the general, trying to unite the party behind him. Ken Paxton just had his primary last week. So Rico has far more time to switch gears for the general. That's the first thing. Secondly, you look at the polls and you begin to realize something. These undecided voters, yet again, are Republican-leaning voters. This is a trend we've noticed in a lot of other races, like in North Carolina. The same thing. Yeah, Michael Watley's down, but you look at the polls and who's undecided, basically all of these voters are Republicans or conservative-leaning voters. A good example is this YouGov poll from a couple weeks ago. And it was 45 Paxton, 45 Rico, but they have the crosstabs here. And right now, Rico is getting 96% of Democrats. Ken Paxton is only getting 85%. Yeah. So Rico is getting basically every single Republican or Democrat voter on his side already. Ken Paxton, according to this poll, wasn't. And in fact, there's like 10% of Republicans are undecided and only 3% of Democrats that are undecided. Gee, I wonder how these voters are going to lean. Yes, some of them are probably John Cornyn voters, but still, you would assume a large chunk of these undecided voters that are Republicans, you would think they would break for Paxton. And these independents, same thing. these independents are more than likely conservative leaning voters. Telrico is already at 45% with indies. Pax is at 20%. So you begin to realize that, yes, Telrico right now, he has a lead. That's true. But at the same time, you look at the crosstabs, you look at who's undecided, you look who's actually releasing these polls, you begin to realize, wait a second here. Telrico is actually not in the situation you want to be in where, yeah, he's at 45%, maybe 47 in some polls. But these undecideds, they're not Democrat voters. They're Republican voters. They're conservative leaning independents. That's a big deal. And with Ken Paxton just having his primary not even a week ago, there is going to be some time before he really picks up some of these John Cornyn voters. So that's why I do think at the end of the day, yeah, Paxton will probably underperform. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. But you look at what's actually going on with the state of the race, Ken Paxton is still in a solid position to win. The polling, I'm not saying it's great for him, but Telrico has had all this time to really consolidate a bunch of voters, and he's still only at 45%. And these independents are basically all Republicans or conservatives. That's not a good sign. That is not good at all. Does that mean Paxton's going to win every single one of them? No. But you would have to assume a chunk of them at least will break for Ken Paxton at the end of the day, which would probably be enough to win. If Telrico was at 50%, he's probably going to win. He's at 46%. Maybe. The averages have him at 44%. Ken Paxton's down. I'm not denying that. When you factor in these independents, you factor in the primaries, give it a couple months, and these polls, just like in the past in Texas, they're probably going to get more Republican. These independents, these Republicans, they're going to break for Paxton at the end of the day. And at that point, it's going to be within like 3 or 4 points, but it doesn't matter. It's still a victory for Ken Paxton and the GOP. Now, we do got to see what happens to the polling. Maybe it doesn't flip. Maybe James Telrico does win these independents. I just don't think so. He is already in the mid to high 40s with independents. He is already getting like 8% of Republicans. Yet he's still in the mid 40s with every Democrat voter behind him. Where are you getting these other voters from? That's the issue. If you're already maxing out with all these groups before the Republican primary, which was very competitive, very costly, you can probably still win, but your chances of actually winning, I do believe, they go down significantly. And that's not even talking about how Telrico is not a strong candidate. In fact, I have no clue why Democrats picked this guy, but my goodness, this guy has said so much crazy and wacky shit. He has a lot of stuff surrounding him. There is so much ad material here for the GOP. This is not a strong candidate. If he's struggling already to be in the mid 40s, what's going to happen after the GOP unleashes their war chest? When they unleash all this crazy stuff that he said in the past about God being non-binary and all this other wacky stuff about whiteness and we're a meat-free campaign, now we're not. We're going to see what happens, but man, even though Paxton's not the strongest candidate, this is who Democrats are running with. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.